Welcome to Rethink Community Podcast, brought to you by Think Tank, Inc. I'm your host, John White. For the last 10 years, Think Tank has been helping people and organizations step into the stories of those who face poverty every day. We believe that stories have the power to break through our opinions and positions and bring us together. On this podcast, we bring you real stories from real people who have grappled with poverty, faced obstacles, blazed new trails, and forged unlikely relationships. For many of us, foster care or kinship care is an abstract system, something we know exists but rarely cross paths with personally. For our guests today, foster and kinship care became much more than an abstract concept when they began caring for their kids in their homes. We'll hear their stories and how they see the system working for families, kids, and those who share their homes with them. And I want to welcome Tia Sheets and Teri DeVoe. Tia, you've been working in the child welfare space, and Teri, you've been working as a foster parent. Welcome, Teri and Tia.
Thank you.
Excellent. And Tia, you both have incredible stories, and you're both great advocates and very articulate about these issues. And this is going to be issues, your experiences as in the state of Ohio, and we all know that there's a lot of work, reform work in Ohio that's going on, and that you're both really involved in. So, Tia, this is for you. Tell us. And then Teri, you can go after Tia, but tell us how you became involved in the kinship care space, Tia.
So in 2015, I became aware that several of my cousin's children were going to be placed into foster care, and so I talked to my then husband at the time about what we would be able to do, and so we started with the three children, eventually got custody of a fourth child, and so I had those kids on and off for the past 5 years.
Okay, and Teri, how did you become involved?
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, we our church every November the first Sunday of November we celebrate what we call Stand Sunday, where we really bring light to the crisis that is foster care, right? And so at the time, the director of my county's children's services came and spoke to us about the need for foster parents. And it really was a very clear call for us that was really what God had brought us to and had really directed us to. We had three biological kids at the time, so I had a bit of pause, right? Like, I don't know, God, you may be calling the wrong woman, but it was pretty clear to both my husband and I that the home we had just purchased and the area we were in, that really was the path that we had taken and God had brought us to. And so we contacted our county and said, hey, we'd like to be foster parents, and started the training classes and all the pre-service work, and we became licensed in October of 2012, and then took our first foster placement in December of 2012.
Great, Teri. And Tia, in the kinship care, tell what surprised you. Obviously, you were not aware of this probably not aware of the major decision you were making, and the impacts and the great impacts and some difficult impacts it had on your family. But what surprised you about your experiences with the kinship care?
I think the biggest struggle for me was realizing how limited resources were for families versus like our foster parents, because there's a giant gap if you don't make enough money to not need assistance, or if you don't make so little money that you qualify for assistance. Essentially, there are very little resources available to you, and it could be quite devastating financially. And then in addition to that,
I guess I just always had the mindset that you could, if you loved a child enough, that you could really kind of get through all of the trauma. But with a lack of access to resources or benefits, you can't outlove trauma. It's just devastating and can really limit the caregiver's ability to take care of kids in a manner which is, I mean, not just wanted, but necessary for their well-being.
Right, right. And anything else that just surprised you, but outside of the support, lack of support? Uh, uh, yeah.
I guess I would say probably just the trauma that kids are exposed to. I mean, I had an understanding of that before based on, the kind of work I do, but seeing small children being able to do things that were extremely violent and dangerous, not just to themselves, but to siblings or the people taking care of them. And then to go from that to being sweet, loving, adorable children the very next moment was really shocking because the amount of emotion that comes through experiencing that and then being able to set that aside and not be upset or angry about the violence or the things that, like the behaviors, I think was especially difficult and surprising.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's that must be must have had a significant impact on you and your family and taking on 4 kids. Just heroic work. Teri, what surprised you about your foster care experience?
Yeah, so I had parented children before, but I will echo Tia's comments about the impacts that trauma have had on these kiddos that we're bringing into our homes and how early that trauma can present itself. I'm lucky that the county that I was licensed through, everything is trained through a trauma lens. So, heading in, I had what I thought was a decent understanding of trauma. But, looking back, I'm really just touching the tip of the iceberg. Really, for our family, the surprising part was how much we would connect with birth families, right? When you're headed into foster care, you think, oh, I'm going in to love these kids, and it's all the focus is on the kids. But I have to tell you that God has really taught me a lot about who He is through the families that I've served that love these kids, right? Yes, they've experienced trauma, and some of these parents have made extremely bad choices, and there are those cases of severe abuse and those things where things are intentionally done to children to harm them. But in the majority of families that I've been privy to work with, these families truly have loved their children. Some things have happened in their life that have taken them off course. And so to be witness to some of the most heartbreaking moments of their lives and to be witness to some of the most beautiful moments of their lives, right? When you look at the spectrum of kids unifying and in that moment of, I've accomplished this is a goal that I set and I did it, to that heartbreak of, permanent custody is going to be taken from me and my kids are going to be removed permanently. And so that's been the biggest surprise to me is how much I would learn and grow, and especially in my faith, from the birth families of the children that have been placed in my home.
Yeah, sounds like a roller coaster, probably of with UT as well, just emotions and joys, yet distress. What a journey for both of you. Now, what's when you do this foster care or kinship care, you're kind of in a bubble, or people are folks are looking at you, families are looking at you, the community is looking at you. How can they do this? They're looking at you and certainly with they're admiring your resilience and your willingness to do this. Yet they're kind of you're kind of exposed, and so what is something that you think people misunderstand about just the child welfare system, Tia?
Oh, Lord.
You have some...
I could go on for a long time. I mean, there are multiple things, right? So a lot of people think that people end up in the child welfare system because they're bad people. And that's not necessarily the case. Even with people who, have addiction issues and mental health issues, or just, a lack of understanding of how they should parent. But I think there's that misconception of like, what is child welfare and how do people end up there, and what people do that work there. And then I think when you like agree to take in relatives, or, the kinship placement can even be, non-relative placements. I think that people just don't understand how much work it is, that like you see these behavior with children and they're automatically lumped into like bad behavior, or less desirable behavior means bad kids. And that's simply not the case. When you have kids that have PTSD or ODD, or just the whole experience of, having been traumatized or abused and neglected as severely as some children can be, I think they just don't understand that. And it's that kids aren't having this behavior because of their past and their own experience, but just because they're bad kids. And that's especially frustrating, I think, when dealing with other relatives who don't fully understand what's going on, or school systems who just want to lump behaviors as like they're just not listening. So I think that for me was probably harder than just the financial piece, which was, extremely hard all by itself.
Very good. And Teri, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I will echo everything that Tia said. She is spot on when people, from the outside don't understand that these behaviors aren't coming because, the child hasn't been disciplined properly or things like that, right? And no amount of timeout is going to make them change their behavior, or things like that. So, and I echo that school system, right? Which that needs some work, because obviously our kids are in the system, and the system is not friendly to those kids. And I say not friendly, but they're not being unkind. But the way the system is set up, it's just not equipped for the way that our kids need to learn, right, and express their emotions. But for me, I as a foster parent get told several times. Matter of fact, when I was on the governor's call earlier today, they referred to me as a hero, and people have said, "Oh, you're amazing," and and I need to be very clear that I'm not. I am a human being. I am a normal, typical mom. And I have said many times that the only difference in me and someone who is not a foster parent is that I've gone ahead and put myself in a place where they will call me and say, "Hey, we've got this kiddo. Can he or she come to your house?" I often say, so if someone called you today and said that there was a child that was in need of a home, would you say no? And they said, "Well, no, probably not." And I said, "Well, see, then there you go. We're no different than each other. The only difference is I've taken those couple steps forward to go ahead and be proactive about that and said, yeah, call me first, right? And I'll do that." So I think it's really important to know that, I have some training, but everybody can get trained. I don't know that I'm any different from any other mom out there. I've just really said, I see this as an issue in my community. This is the way I'm going to step in and serve. And in the child welfare space, there's so many ways to do that, right? I don't say that I'm not saying that everyone should be a foster parent, because I don't believe that. I do believe more people could be foster parents than think that they could. But where we're headed as child welfare and as a society is everybody needs to have a place at the table, right? And everybody, yes, you may not be welcoming a child in your home, but there's space for you to serve those kids and those families as we move forward, because truly we are in a crisis as it comes to kids in foster care and their families, and addiction and all the things that surround our families. And so there is work to be done, and there's enough work for everyone to have a part in that.
Okay, well said. And I want to ask Tia the magic wand question that many folks are asked about. If you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the child welfare system, what would that be? What are one or two things that come to mind that with your great experience and with also your desire to continuously fix a system that can be broken over time, and with incremental improvements get better and better to meet the crisis that we're facing here in Ohio. What's a magic wand? What are your thoughts there, Tia?
Well, so, I mean, obviously the first magical answer, right, is that there would be no need for a child welfare system.
Yes.
People wouldn't find themselves in this situation, but that's obviously not realistic. So I think for me, specifically speaking to kinship placements, would be the ability to access benefits faster and without custody.
Right.
Because a lot of times there's just no benefits available, and so you can't access, like the cash assistant benefit. There are some ways you can access it before you have custody, but if you're the relative I was not able to. So the last time I got some of these kiddos was in February this year, and then Corona happened. The agency hadn't had time to file for me to have custody yet, and it got pushed out. So I didn't get benefits for these kiddos until July of that same year. So I had them for 5 months before I was able to access their Medicaid or the cash assistance benefit. So not being able to take a kid who had asthma to the doctor to get asthma medicine was insane. And then I think the other magic wand would just be understanding in general, whether it be for the actual child welfare system and the court system and schools or family members and, other people, just understanding like how difficult this is. And then a foster parent, or not foster parents, well, I mean them too. So foster parents or kinship relatives are saying, I can't do this, like this is outside of my scope, that there would be an understanding about how difficult those decisions were, and not the guilt or the wanting kids to stay where they're at, because obviously every move is traumatic for kids. But I think sometimes we forget that adults have limits themselves, and we don't do children's service, service anyway, by refusing to acknowledge somebody saying that they can or cannot do something.
Wow. Yes. So, Terry, you want to dovetail on that? I know that you have been part of systems change and part of the governor's team. What are those gaps of needs that for foster care parents and other support systems that you could think of that might need to be involved in this in remedy some of these needs?
Sure. I often think, so I'm involved in a group that our goal is more than enough, right? So more than enough for biological families before kids even need to come into foster care, more than enough foster families for those kids waiting, fostering kinship families, more than enough adoptive families for those kiddos who will need forever families, and then more than enough support for those kiddos who are aging out of foster care. And so, I try to look at everything, all the programming and all the, things. That's my kind of magic wand, right? Like, what would I, and I'll echo Tia again. It would be that no kids would ever need to come in foster care, but we know that we live in a broken world, and this is our reality. But my magic wand is really kind of, the work that we've done as far as transforming the child welfare community. It's just, again, as a community, we really need to understand that, these aren't just kids who child welfare needs to worry about, and then their foster parents or their kinship parents, right? It's bus drivers, it's teachers, it's doctors, it's therapists, it's, for example, one time our foster daughter, she was a high school senior, and she played soccer, and she did something on the field, and a ref, threw a flag about it, and I instinctively wanted to say, but wait, you don't understand that this kid has suffered from trauma. So it's a trauma response for her. Not right. And again, I wasn't trying to get her out of punishment, but there has to be so much advocacy and education and conversation about this, right? We can't keep this as a, not that it's a secret. I don't know that that's a great descriptive word, but it just needs to be a conversation, right? Foster parents need to be able to go to teachers and say, hey, listen, we're going to really have to communicate about our kiddo. And I know that he or she is probably going to be a struggle for you in the classroom. tell me as a foster parent how I can help, and then let's rally the troops, right? Do we need to get a volunteer in your classroom? Pre-COVID, to assist with that kid, right? Let's really dream big about what it is that's going to best serve our kids, right? And not keep them in this box of their behavior and their limitations, because those kiddos and their families, right? Their families need those resources as well, and encouragement and assistance and help. And it's going to take the whole community really saying, you know what, I have a part in this, and I need to find out what it is, and let's work together, because if not, we think the crisis is bad now, but if we really don't get a handle on it, it's going to, just keep repeating itself as we go on, and we'll really get to an even bigger crisis level.
Wow. And as we close here, I know that Teri and Tia have put their lives on the line in many cases for these kids, and I know that there's nothing is wasted as far as your extension of love and to these kids, and you even though you don't think you've had an impact on or big impact on these kids, but in fact we know that you have. It's just tell us one example that you can even in the tougher times that you've had your love and extension of care has had an impact on a child. You have an example of that you can always, even in the darkest times, you can always hang on and say, I'm still having an impact on this child, and that child will never forget my love in the time he was here or she was here in my family. Tia, do you have an example of that?
Yes, and so I'm going to start with the sad part of it. So there were really dark moments where I thought that I wasn't doing, or that I was literally destroying my own family or my own self, and trying to figure out how to deal with that. And these children are worth everything, and whatever little piece you could do, you should do, because these children are in such need of love and support, as well as for the families too. And whether it's the bio family or the foster family or the kinship family, it's just a lot to do, and the work is so worth it, because you want kids to grow up to be well balanced, productive people. And let's stop clearly.
Yeah. Those tiny little acts of love and kindness and forgiveness, they will never forget, and you just never know where that's going to take that child, even in the midst of that, some sorrow, certainly, and difficulty. Teri, you got an example?
Yeah. So, I shared before that when we were first licensed, we said, we're only taking babies 0 to 2. We don't want to adopt anybody, right? And our course has changed since then. But early on in that, we did an emergency placement of a young man who was in his teenage years, and come over Valentine's Day. And, again, emergency placement only. There was a time that I said, hey, well, what if we could? And the caseworker even stopped me and said, no, you may not. Right, this child's behaviors long-term are not something that's going to hurt for your home or whatever. But, we have a tradition, in our house, that I just go to the dollar store and get those little tiny, there's like 4 chocolates inside the little candy box or whatever, right? $1. But everybody gets one, in the morning before school on Valentine's Day, And so when he came down that morning, his was lined up in the mix of everybody else's. And it really, it was a powerful moment, because he turned and he looked at me and he said, is that for me? And I said, well, yeah, of course, man. Happy Valentine's Day, And he goes, no one has ever done anything that kind for me before. Thank you. And, once he was, he knew that he was temporary in our home, right? And so, but, in conversations with the caseworker, she said he took that box of he ate the chocolate in the morning, of course, but he took that with him, and I love that because I want him to know, right, that ultimately, yes, we love you, before you even got here, right? We hate that you had to come here because of the circumstances, but you were loved simply because you are who you are. And we love you, and God loves you, and no matter where you are, whether you're in our home or not, that's not going to change, right? And so he has had some struggles along the way, and has reached back out to us a couple times, and is still struggling. But I just hope that he still has that heart box and knows that no matter what, he is still loved by us, and he is loved ultimately by his Creator as well.
Wonderful. Those tiny seeds that are planted,
right?
And you'll maybe someday you'll see even as it flowers as well. And Tia Sheets and Teri DeVoe, we really thank you for stepping out and stepping up and being the people that you are. And we thank you for being on another Think Tank podcast. Tia, Teri, thank you so much. This has been the Rethink Community Podcast, brought to you by Think Tank, Inc., with music by Elijah Hamilton. Don't forget to subscribe to hear upcoming episodes featuring the stories of other courageous individuals we think you should know. And if you're part of an organization that would like to be better equipped to serve people in poverty, be sure to check out the resources we offer, including the Cost of Poverty Experience, or COPE, at thinktank-inc.org/COPE. Join the hundreds of businesses, schools, colleges, churches, and healthcare providers that have used the Cost of Poverty Experience, along with our other suite of tools and coaching to find new ways of thinking and responding to poverty.